Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Anasa. So happy to see you. So let's meditate. And we'll continue to work on the practice that we started a month or so ago of doing the Om sound that starts from deep into our pelvis and goes straight up the central channel and out the top of our head. And the first 9 times we do it, we'll do it with sound. Then we'll do it 9 times whispering. Then we'll do it silently 9 times inside ourselves, watching the energy go up as we say the sound. And then the last 9 times, we'll do it just watching the energy without saying the words. Okay? And the Om sound is ah. It's 3 parts. It's ah, ooh, mm. And with the it's sort of like, it sort of rings and buzzes in a way so that it, like a bee, you have the feeling of like it's pushing and allowing the vibration to really happen in the third eye chakra. So you may experience it a bit deeper in your body than we have before as you're really connecting to your central channel. So I'm going to demonstrate the sound once, and then after it, do it with me. You don't have to do the same pitch. Do whatever pitch works for you. So you take a deep breath, and you can start with the first one through your mouth, but if you can breathe through your nose between the intonations, it's helpful to train yourself to do that, to breathe through your nose. But I know a lot of us are congested this time of year, so whatever works is fine. Just take a deep breath in between. So here we go. Om. Now just say the words inside yourself as you watch the energy rise. Very slowly, hold your attention where it is inside your body. Slowly open your eyes just a slit. Let a little bit of light in. Hold your attention inside. Open a little further. Still holding your attention in. Open your eyes. And feel what it's like to look at the world from the inside. Without allowing your attention to go outside your body. And in this moment, you'll see how distracted your normal presence is as you view the world. Usually we're 5 or 6 inches ahead of our body with our attention. And it's usually because we're reaching for a screen to connect with rather than a person. So just to have the sensation of being completely inside and looking out. Ancient peoples lived like this. They were inside more than they were outside. Because of course that's how we're born. So you can see how easy it is to follow your breath when your attention is still inside, even though your eyes are open. So you can use this place of reference whenever things are getting heated in your life, in your emotions. You can take a breath and bring yourself to this place. And the more familiar it is to you, the easier it is to access with your breath. You just pull your energy back into yourself. And it gives you the space to consider your next action so that it's not a reaction. Because if you give yourself the space, you might actually do or say something totally different than what just pops out when we're stimulated by something outside us. So welcome. Please bring us your questions. So happy to see everybody. What's happening? How may we serve today? Well, we can talk about the weather. It's a beautiful day here in Portland. Sun's out. Not quite warm yet, but getting there. It's no longer so dark in the morning. Seems like we had a lot less rain this winter than usual. We didn't have our usual 40 days and 40 nights where we start thinking it's time to build the ark. We kind of like this meditation. What do you guys think of it? Seems like an easy way to get deeper access. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to go to Hawaii, but we're going to still try to do our programs from there. So we're looking forward to the vacation, but we won't take a vacation from you. So hopefully the Wi-Fi's good. We're happy to take questions. Anything, Brenda?
Why does our brain want to hold on to the negative so and so strongly? And I can just speak for myself if it's unique to me. Why is that so impactful? And how do I avoid it, I guess?
Well, so we get into habits of mind, and it's because the way the energy comes in, we're used to responding it in a particular pattern because our minds recognize patterns. And so when something comes in, some feeling arises, and we immediately look for the situation in our life that could be responsible for that feeling or could be attached to that feeling through the habit of our mind relating and sort of reducing. The way our beings work is they look for patterns and then they look for cause. And then the whole blame thing is, or it's either blame or it's self-rejection. It's one of those two things. We either attribute cause to outside us or attribute cause to some flaw inside us when a negative feeling arises. And so the trick is to understand that that's actually what's happening, that we are creating our reality to match the last time we had that same feeling. We immediately assign it to whatever was happening then, but we assign it to our present rather than our past. Even though it's much more associated to our past, we use our past experience to interpret what may have nothing to do with it in the present. So we're creating complication out of our past by assuming, because our minds recognize a pattern, we say, oh, that's just like when somebody else said this to me. Maybe when we were 6 years old. And we've been cycling that pattern forever because we decided that that's what that feeling meant. And so we immediately assign it usually to something outside or someone, most often outside ourselves, who has maybe nothing to do with it. You know, it's possible that somebody just walked by carrying that feeling and you happen to take it personally and assume that there was some communication between yourself and even a third party, not knowing where that feeling came from, and you're off to the races with a whole bunch of assumptions that have nothing to do with what may really be happening. And when you understand that, then you start to be a little more careful with any negativity that arises. And the first thing you can do, say, you disconnect the feeling and the reaction. If you can get in front of it. Usually somebody walks by, we feel something and our reaction is out, just like that. Or we've embedded the reaction to wait for a later moment to create an interaction with somebody else based on that feeling. So we've either reacted and stored it or reacted and sent it. Hit the send button when we open our mouth. And so the thing to do to begin to short circuit that pattern in ourselves is first we understand that that pattern is, that reacting to that pattern is not serving our highest connection to ourselves. Because very often when we react to something that is that we attribute to the negative feeling that just passed through us, usually when we react to that, we are creating more negativity with our reaction instead of going to our alignment, breathing into our alignment, and then consciously responding without disturbing our connection to our highest by rejecting anything outside of us, which disturbs it, or rejecting anything inside us. We're actually conscious about holding to our alignment. And the feeling of that alignment is when we came out of meditation and our attention was inside, even though we were looking out and we hadn't like put our attention out here, that is a centered, aligned place when there's no thought of reactivity involved in that space. And you know, we're really glad you brought this up because of course every single one of us has this happen at least 100 times every day. All of us. Whenever we interact, something of this nature happens in the interaction, even or especially with people we deeply, deeply love, because we identify their actions and reactions as though they are extensions of us because they represent our choice in some ways. Especially the closer we are to the people, the less individuated our interactions are. And in some ways, the less they have to do with current reality because we develop patterns in our relationships that we act out just out of habit. And depending on how conscious we were when we set up these reactions or how much in love we were deeply, we might have set up some really good ones or some really bad ones. Just depends, you know. So if we continually have a negative interaction with somebody, it means that we need to really examine those patterns within ourselves and see if we can start to. And whenever you want to change a pattern with another person, the first thing you do is not go have a conversation with them. The first thing you do is have a conversation with yourself about what would be the highest way to begin to shift this pattern. And then you create a sentence that you want to say to the other person from your highest self to their highest self in the protected space of the Inasa temple. Because when you want to make a change with anyone you're close to, you want it to be really conscious and you want it to serve the highest. And so identifying a pattern and going and talking to them about it is the quickest way to create a conflict. And so it helps to get in the habit of really moving through the things you want to change very consciously and being quiet as you observe what happens. And this brings a level of consciousness to our interactions that previously we didn't have. And so we're starting to engage our life as though it's a journey, as though it's something we're actively participating in a conscious way, rather than just reacting moment to moment to try to get what we think we want. And so it helps to step back and say, well, what is it that we really want? To ask ourselves this question, what is it that we really want in our lives? Because most of us are, we're going through the motions. We've been alive for a long time. We've gathered a lot of experience. We have a lot of habits. And so we just act out those same patterns day after day after day, because we've never been offered even the concept that we have an opportunity to relate to ourselves and our environment and everybody in it differently. Like we could actually begin to behave in each of our interactions with awareness. And the first thing that requires is a little bit of discipline to actually close our mouth before we react. And examine what's going on in our brains. And instead of assuming that because we're thinking it, it's right, we approach it with the assumption that this is a very old reaction that we haven't really looked at, usually for decades. And that it might not have anything to do with what's really happening in this moment. And we just bring a fresh perspective instead of assuming that because it's going through our brain, it's true. And just for an experiment, you can assume that it's not true and look at it from that perspective before you say anything. And that gives you a little bit of space And then when you do respond, you respond with an openness to reinterpret what you're experiencing. Like you might even ask a question. Say somebody that you're used to having really good flow with snarls at you. Might even be your boss. You know, somebody that you, or somebody very close to you that you deeply respect. And so you might step back and say, how are you? Just investigate what's happening. Like, instead of assuming that you know what's happening, ask. And ask with a cultivated openness. Because, you know, when somebody snarls at us, we immediately are triggered to snarl back. Because we tend to match any energy that comes in. And if it's negative, we'll defend, protect. But if instead we open and say, what? What? What are you feeling? And we may get an explanation, and we may not. But if we can stay open and not use the judgment of something that happened 25 years ago to respond to something that's presenting in the moment, we have created a space for that pattern to reorganize. And one of the things that we know about patterns is that if you're conscious in the pattern and you're holding space, that when things change, they change for the better. Because energetic flow is happening, and it might be restricted in a certain way. And if you want to change that flow, you just add a little bit of compression to it. And this works throughout the dimensions of ourselves: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. When there's a pattern going and it starts to disrupt, if we just add a little bit of compression, like by holding our mouth shut and holding the feeling, it will come to a still point, and then it will reorganize, and then it will increase its range of motion as it begins to flow again. This is the pattern of life force and how it works. So whenever it's starting to get wobbly, if we can just take our attention to it and compress it a little bit and hold it, it will reorganize. And this happens in every part of our lives. Every part. This is the essence of cranial osteopathic treatment, but it works throughout energetic systems. And every one of our systems at its center, at its core, is an energetic system. So if we engage our emotions as an energetic system, and say anger rises up, if we can just hold that anger and add a little compression to it, it will turn to something else. And 99.9% of the time, it's going to be something much better. Now, what we usually do is we add the compression, and then, you know, we turn it into a bomb, you know, because our mind is circling with all the times we've ever felt this. And so we're recycling that old pattern and intensifying it, and then it explodes. So that's the other thing that can happen when you add a little compression. So you have to make sure that your mind is not in a circular motion, creating more and more intensity to justify the explanation of the experience that just came your way. That's the downside of compression, is if you haven't released your mind, released the pattern in your mind, then you can cycle with your mind in a circle, repeating that bad thing that person did to you and create something not so wonderful that you then gift to them the next time they walk past you. So that's not what we're talking about doing. What we're talking about doing is being quiet in yourself, restraining, being aware of the pattern, just restricting it, but not putting energy into it, just allowing the energy that's there to be held. Just to be held so that it can change. And once you experience this a few times, you'll know exactly what we're talking about.
So a follow-up question is, how do we add compression?
Just by being quiet. So you take the feeling and you allow yourself, if you can get it below your belly button, that's good. Definitely, you do not want to be reacting mentally and cycling the energy in a circle of thoughts that are getting more and more intense about how, somebody did something to you. So you take that experience that's happening in your head and you literally, with your attention and your breath, you pull that energy down, down, as far as you can. If you can get it to your heart, that's helpful, because then you can breathe into it and begin to expand your heart. If you can get it down to below your belly button, you can actually dissolve it. So part of that is you can train yourself to sort of have a vacuum, an energetic vacuum in your belly. And when one of these things happens, you just kind of open it up and the thing falls down into your belly. That will happen with a little bit of experience, creating that channel, which we're working on. When we meditate, we're working on sending our energy up so that we're preparing for expansion into higher and finer energy. And when we're at rest, it's good to practice this expansion into higher and finer energy, because of course, that's where we want to be, what we want to be doing when we die, is that practice. Because leaving from the vertical is what we want to cultivate. So if we build that into our meditation, it becomes a habit. It takes 21 days to make a habit. And it's best if we start before we need it, long before we need it. Does that answer the question?
It it does. There's a lot to digest. My innate response is to close and to protect, and mentally, emotionally, physically pull away. But I know that that doesn't serve anyone, and so that's what I'm fighting against. that protective space.
So if you redefine in yourself that protection as a temporary withdrawal while you reevaluate what's really happening, then that can give you the space to begin to, first of all, by pulling the energy down, you can dissolve the reaction. And so the reaction that you're feeling is you're being attacked, but you're not ready to attack back. So you pull back to gather your resources, and what's likely to happen is something based on that feeling of being attacked. So what do we do when we're attacked? And everybody does this. This is not about you. When we're attacked, we get small. So we close everything down so we can't be seen. So when we do that, we are, look at this position, waiting to be hit again. And that signals to our environment that we're waiting to be hit. And that magnetizes whatever in the environment that is looking for a place to hit is going to be magnetized to that thing. You can see how animals react when one's like this. It depends on how old they are and if they have a protective mother. But usually that signals weakness. And if there's a predator, they'll go for the one who's doing that. So understanding that, you want to first of all say Ho'oponopono into that pattern, because that's an old pattern. It may or may not be relevant to what's actually happening in the moment. You're just assuming that that was an attack meant to be at you, meant to inform you about something that the other person is attributing to you. And so the first thing is to diffuse yourself, to say Ho'oponopono into that protective hidden, into that part of yourself, so that some softness can come up, some confidence about your ability to deal with whatever's coming in. Because you of all people are so skilled at managing social interaction that you know how to be loving. Most people have to learn this. You really have mastered this. You know how to be with someone and open your heart. That's like your natural default position. So bringing yourself back to that state with Ho'oponopono is the absolute best thing you can do. And then you're back to a neutral state. You're no longer like this. You still don't know what's happening. You allow yourself to not know why that happened, instead of judging yourself wrong and backing yourself into a corner to signal weakness. Instead, just say, I don't know what's going on here, and open yourself back up. And you just continuously do that until you understand the pattern. Because nothing that you do other than that is going to create anything but things that don't serve the future in that interaction. So if you can continuously, you diffuse this so that you come back to this, and say it happens again. So you do this, you say Ho'oponopono until you can relax and open again. And until the pattern really explains itself, and you wait for the opportunity to say, what's happening to the other person in some way that's totally socially acceptable. And if that opportunity doesn't happen in a way that feels like there's flow involved, then you just keep doing your own process. You know, I'm assuming this is one thing. I may be right, I may be wrong. I'm going to open. And you make that your default setting. Because really, the most self-harm you can do is this. That's self-harm. If you're in a situation where you don't have any power, or you perceive yourself not to have power. Does that make sense? So the way you make yourself strong is actually to come back to your loving center. Inhabit that. And you just don't assume that you know what's happening, because you don't. And we all do this every day. We react to things that happen in our lives as though there's something that happened decades earlier, especially with negativity. And the deeper our assumption, the quicker our reaction. We hope that answers. Really good questions. We're all doing this every day. This is the heart of, you know, where the cushion hits the road. Because, you know, our meditation may be wonderful, and we may come into a peace and stillness and joy. Then we walk out into traffic and go berserk. Because I've never had that experience.
So is it releasing the outcome? Because the protection is fear, but if you're not fearing the outcome of whatever you think is going on, is it just?
You're releasing the assumption that the outcome is going to be negative in your favor. That's what you're releasing. You're just releasing that. You know you didn't do anything wrong. So the other person may be having a confused moment, and you just happen to be, you know, on the other end of that. So you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. You're giving yourself the benefit of the doubt, and you're waiting for the situation to show you the truth. You're waiting for it. And it may take weeks for the whole thing to show itself. And usually, very often, it turns out to be either something ill-considered on their part, or something that they, you know, if this is a previously fine relationship, something that they, you know, may have changed in themselves, but not communicated in a very effective way. Or it may be some judgment they've made about themselves that they're somehow putting on you. I mean, you have no idea. You just have to wait for it to show itself. And until that time, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. But in our reactive state, we judge ourselves and everybody else to be guilty until proven innocent. We don't have a very good constitution built into our reactions. unless we start to really cultivate taking a breath whenever any negativity appears, backing up in ourselves so that we're centered in ourselves, like actually in that place of meditation, which is back at least, most of us keep our attention out here because we're used to interacting with screens. So we're not even in our bodies anymore. So whenever we have a reaction,
almost ready.
Whenever we have a reaction, we're not gathered in ourselves. We have to pull ourselves back, breathe to get ourselves back into our space. And then we have access to our real feeling. And then we say Ho'oponopono into that feeling to give it a chance to change, because that feeling has to do with the last time somebody told us we were wrong in a very, usually a parent, like really corrected us in a way that was so dynamic that whenever anything that feels like that comes toward us, we reflexively do this. And we turn away and shut down, and then nobody can access us. So we pull ourselves back, we breathe, we talk to our inner self. Thank you, I'm sorry, I love you. Thank you, I love you, I'm sorry. And we just occupy that space as we reconnect to our own highest self. And then from that reconnection, we can begin to breathe deeper, and then we have our own internal flow back. And then we have a completely different perspective on what's happening. That different perspective naturally arises. And in you, your default setting is your heart open and ready to interact with flow. And so that's the way. And eventually you'll know. And you'll be, then you'll be able to respond from a real place, because you're not closed off. Does that help? It's not easy. It's simple, but it's really not easy. Really not easy. But every attempt we make to engage this way and master ourselves in this way, it's so valuable. Even if we can only take a breath, even if we can only consider that how we're responding might not be the best, and try to connect to our highest, any thought like that is big progress. And if we get the breath and the thought to reevaluate at the same time, that's the biggest gift we can give to ourselves, because we've just created a flow that allows us to work deeper in ourselves and not be punished by our own assumptions, which may or may not be true or false. But it helps to assume that they're false, because that's the only way we can re-engineer the system. Anything?
There, a question earlier. Say something about levels of karma.
Well, the reason we're being quiet is because well, there are different kinds of karma. There's karma that we came in with, that we, and that's our blueprint. Our blueprint is the karma that we came in with. It's the reason we came in this life. It's the things we chose to experience in this life so that we could have the opportunity to grow through those experiences into a finer human being. And the way that works is if we take those experiences and grow into a finer human being, then in the simplest of situations, what happens is we don't attract that experience for very long because we have changed ourselves from the experience into a higher and finer person. So we're attracting something different. So karma is a pattern that we have that attracts certain experiences. That's how we could talk about it. And so the karma that we come in with is the blueprint that attracts us the experiences that we want to grow through. And the more well, it's like this, one of the patterns I have, Rebecca has, is to have this reaction in traffic where, if somebody cuts her off, she'll start talking to the traffic, not very nicely. And then the second time somebody does it, it gets worse. And then there's a red light, and the person, when it turns green, the person sits there for 10 seconds before they move. And the whole thing starts to, it can evolve to rage pretty quickly. That's the default that she was given. It's a planetary setup. So of course the solution is to completely relax. First of all, breathe, understand that that's the pattern, and that the pattern is trying to magnetize a certain emotional response. And that the solution to doing that is to just not care. Because the truth is, are you going to get there any quicker? No. Really, no. All it does is make you, and the stronger your energy, the more other people feel it. And so, you're creating a traffic jam just by having that intense anger coming out of that space. It affects everybody. And the bigger your energy, the more it affects everybody. And so it can really, create something pretty nasty as we get stronger and stronger and stronger. So, you have to respect your own energy so much that you change the pattern. You see it, you breathe, put something in the atmosphere like a piece of music you love. Makes you feel really good. Have that there. And then something different can happen. So this is what karma's like. And sadly, that's an easy one because it's, it's pretty obvious. But we all have them. These are the patterns that we came in with, that where in certain situations we react badly. We become the negativity that we would wish to dissolve in ourselves. And so whatever we have that brings that to the surface, this shows us our work. And if we're really lucky, we go for a whole year without driving because of COVID, and then we get to do a do-over that's just completely starting over with that pattern. And so it's so clear that it stops happening. And in that situation, there's some built-in fixes. Like one of the best things that's been for traveling, when there's the automatic cruise control that adjusts the speed of the car to the speed of the car in front of you, so you don't even have to do anything. I mean, that's like, that allows for surrender in that situation because you don't even have to react by putting your foot on the brake. And so you look for solutions that help you manage these situations where you get triggered out of control. And, usually there aren't that many, at the most 4 different kinds of those in a person's life. And when you identify them, then you can begin to work on them. And it's nice when they're that dramatic and clear, because then they're easy to see. And they don't involve trying to change somebody else, which is often what we do instead of addressing our own issues. So that's a certain kind of karma that comes in our blueprint that as we learn to relate to these things with a higher and finer frequency in ourselves, they begin to change. And then it doesn't happen anymore. And so that is a karma that we have evolved out of. And, that's sort of a mundane way of identifying what a karma is. But we have other things, probably any of us, if we remember what dating was like, we probably attracted the same partner a few times that we're maybe no longer with because it wasn't the best for us. We had to evolve out of attracting that kind of partner. Many of us have had that situation happen. And, those are ones that we came in with in our blueprint because we agreed to have those experiences so that we could be a higher and finer person. So those are sort of examples of how karma appears. And then there are things that create karma where we we do something that we know is not serving the highest, but we do it anyway. That creates karma. And we create karma by the things we do to ourselves that we know are not the best, but we do it anyway. So dealing with karma involves first the recognition that we're doing something that's not serving our highest. And then, ho'oponopono until we're in alignment in ourselves. And then we solution orient. And so we'll give you some advice about how to solution orient with the things you want to change inside yourself. We'll use sugar as an example. Like everybody pretty much recognizes that sugar's not good for any of us. But there's certain seasons and celebrations that have sugar built into them, since we're having Valentine's Day tomorrow. That's one of them. So sugar's built into that holiday. So what do? We all know sugar's not good for us. We have a choice. There's the yes, no choice. And then there's the yes for one day, and then I'll never do it again. And we all know how that goes. At least for Rebecca, the way that one works is, okay, I'll do it for one day. And then that day, my body's just fine. I'll go, oh, I haven't eaten sugar for a long time. Maybe my body doesn't react to it anymore. So then one day turns into two. And then 10 days later, there's the sigh. Okay, this isn't working. And then dump it. That's the pattern. So you recognize the pattern, and there's a way that you can take one bite and have that be enough. That's possible. So that you get to taste. You're not rigid in your restriction, and you're doing no harm to yourself. And then there's the whole question, is a 10-day pattern that bad? Maybe you can make it a 3-day pattern. Solution orienting has to do with satisfying all the different parts of yourself, because all of us have experienced that when we rigidly lock down with a decision, it doesn't last, because it's not real. It's not based on how we're wired. And so we find solutions that create flow within us that we can sustain. And so we're looking for that flow. And it may be, you require 3 bites to have the experience, and then be able to say, okay, no more, because I know my body doesn't do well with this. So these are all kinds of karma. I have a brother who runs 10 miles most days so he can eat whatever he wants. That's his solution to it. And that works. So, we can always solution orient to the things that are difficult karma for us. But it helps to have a continuing conversation because these things change as we age too. So those are a couple realms of karma. But if we're addressing our own negativity on a regular basis and becoming more and more aware of our unexamined habits of reaction and dissolving them into alignment and taking our cues about how to solution orient while we're in alignment so that we know where we're going, then these things get better and better over time. And what used to make us completely crazy, it's victory when we are in one of those situations and it doesn't even occur to us to go crazy. That does happen. And the reason we use Rebecca's experience is because this doesn't mean anything if we just talk about it in esoteric spiritual terms. We can say, take your energy inside, get centered, make sure you're in alignment and only work from there. But that doesn't really tell you anything. But if we tell you live through experience that you can relate to, then that's the reason we talk that way. Also, when we're honest about our own reality, it keeps humility in the picture. And humility is really, really important. Arrogance is blindness. How may we serve further? Oh my goodness. It's time for meditation already. How did that happen? Wow. Feels like we just got here. So much fun to be here with you. So we're going to invite you to take whatever position you want to for meditation. And you can use whatever practice you want to meditate. We will be broadcasting our energy, making it available to you. And we're presenting it in an open eyes format. You can receive it any way you wish. Eyes open, eyes closed. The energy is not limited. We suggest that as an intention, you breathe the energy into yourself as though every cell is a sponge for love, for the highest aligned frequency that is available in the multiverse. We won't pretend to be that, but we'll do our best to have that intention for what you receive. Thank you so much for coming. We love these programs. We love you. Till next week.